a project that we have been calling our institutional innovation grapher, which is, I think, an optimistic way of looking at what we eventually hope to achieve. And what we have today, I think, is the foundation for what will become this vision that we have. That will allow us to not only understand how researchers here at UT Austin are utilizing GitHub, but more broadly, how they are engaging in the development of open source research software and sharing that with others. So eventually, we want to go beyond just GitHub, and we want to not just get the data that we're able to access today, but we do want to acquire additional information and start to see how all of these pieces of information that we are gathering are connected to better understand the networks that are forming or have formed around open source software here at UT Austin. All right, so just to give you all a little bit of background about our open source program office, it was established in August of 2023, so a little over a year ago, with funding from the Sloan Foundation. Our open source program office at UT Austin is a four-way partnership between the Texas Advanced Computing Center, or TAC, Information Technology Transformation, which is kind of rebranding to Enterprise Technology, but essentially our central IT folks, the School of Information, and the UT Libraries, where I am situated. As we were establishing our open source program office, there were a number of objectives that we were hoping to achieve and make headway on based on what we had proposed. And one of the early activities that we thought would be valuable for us to really focus on is to try and identify active members of our UT Austin open source community so that we would be able to more effectively engage in outreach, right? We're a new office on campus, and we felt that it would be important to start to establish connections with the most active members of our open source community, hoping that they would help us spread the word about the services that we are offering to the campus community and be good points of contact for us so that we can get input from them about the services that we provide. And so that was originally one of the key motivating factors, is just trying to learn a little bit more about who is active in our community. And we thought that this might help us facilitate formation of new connections between researchers. So we were hoping that as this project progressed, we would be able to understand who is already collaborating on open source projects and where maybe there is the potential for collaboration that researchers have not been able to identify themselves. But using this approach to gather information holistically about open source activity among our researchers, we were hoping we could identify these opportunities for establishing new connections and putting researchers in contact with one another. And as we look to start to gather information about our open source community, some of the things we were hoping to assess were looking at the current size of the community at the outset of the project, looking at connections between UT Austin open source projects, how our UT Austin researchers might be contributing to external projects, estimate the current community maturity level using our UT OSPO participation pathways. So that was one of the other things that we established at the outset of our work as an open source program office, is trying to identify how far along the open source journey, essentially, our researchers are. Are they at the stage where they're just beginning to use open source tools? Are they starting to contribute to other open source projects? Are they openly sharing projects of their own? Are they accepting contributions from others, or are they at a stage where they are managing a mature open source project where they might not be the only one that's managing acceptance of new contributions and accepting pull requests? So we really wanted to look at this full journey that our researchers might go on as they become more active in open source projects, and be able to better understand, where our researchers currently are at. And so we also established some specific questions, not all of which we've answered, just to have full disclosure here. So some of these things are still a work in progress, but we really wanted this work to be targeted at answering specific questions. So rather than us just starting out and thinking of this as something that we technically could do without knowing what it would allow us to do. We're focused on starting small. Like, all right, let's take this question. Let's see how this approach can help us answer it. So one fairly easy question to answer, we thought, might be how many researchers from UT Austin are currently active on GitHub? Once this project continues over time, then we might be able to assess how that number of active researchers is changing, which could be in part due to the activities of our open source program office, right? That's obviously something that we are trying to facilitate and encourage folks to get active on GitHub and show them how to do it through the trainings that we are offering. We were curious about who the most active researchers are. So again, thinking about how we can really optimize the efficiency of our outreach efforts, right? If we can target those who are most active already on GitHub, they are likely to have other connections that they could utilize to help us spread the word about our open source program office. We wanted to figure out where our researchers are collaborating internally. So who is already, working on projects with others at UT Austin? So where are these maybe key nodes in the network of our researchers? What stage are researchers at on GitHub along this participation pathway, which I've already mentioned? What programming languages are most commonly utilized? So we offer trainings or have offered trainings for years, even prior to the establishment of the open source program office, helping researchers understand how they can get started with programming languages like Python and R, which can be used to develop open source software. And so we wanted to assess which programming languages were most commonly being utilized for projects that were being published on GitHub. What licenses are most commonly utilized. So this, we thought, would also be interesting to look at how many researchers are even assigning a license for the repositories. What licenses are they selecting? Why are they maybe selecting those licenses? And we thought that would be important to help us understand, as we're looking to provide guidance to our community, what licenses are they already using? What are they currently familiar with? And how many of our researchers are putting repositories onto GitHub and not necessarily thinking of assigning a licensing yet, right? That's definitely something that we want to encourage them to do. Sorry, I've gone ahead a little bit. And again, trying to look at just how overall use of GitHub might be changing over time. And for us to do that, we really need to establish a baseline that we can start to measure changes from. So our method for carrying out this work involved using Python, which was something that our team was already familiar with. So that would facilitate internal collaboration as we are working together on this. And obviously it would allow us to easily share our code on GitHub and hopefully make it available in a programming language that others were likely to be familiar with as well. We decided to start using the GitHub REST API, the 2022 latest update to the API. And so we didn't start with the GraphQL API because that was something that we weren't already familiar with. And so we thought, let's just try to move as fast as possible and start with something we already know fairly well. Our query strategy was to look for references to variations of UT Austin. So it might be UT Austin, University of Texas at Austin, the University of Texas at Austin, or other permutations of our institutional name that might be somewhere referenced in a GitHub account bio statement or in the location information that GitHub users are filling in when they create their GitHub account or update it. So we realized that there were definitely going to be limitations to this strategy. Some folks might refer to UT Austin as just UT. That's very common, especially locally here in Texas. But there are a lot of other things that might be referred to as UT. The state of Utah, that's acronym is UT. University of Tennessee is UT. So we realized this is not a perfect methodology, but while we had to start somewhere, right? And thought that we could just continue to improve over time as we think of additional ways to refine our process. But that's been our initial strategy so far. The results of this scripted process generate two separate CSVs. One that is a list of all of the GitHub accounts that have been identified by running through this series of queries to try and find GitHub accounts that are potentially UT Austin affiliated. and then another separate CSV that contains all of the repository information that is associated with each of those GitHub accounts that we have found. The code for this project is openly shared on GitHub under an MIT license. So anybody here can go ahead and access this, as I know some of you have already done that. So thank you for showing an interest in this, and I've appreciated the feedback that we've received so far. So for me, at least, this is really the first, I will say, truly kind of active open source project that I've put out on GitHub that has seen a little bit of uptake, which is great, but it also means I'm still learning some things as well. So if you all take a look at this code and see, well, why isn't it being done in this particular way, please let me know. That might allow me to learn something new. And I think that that's also really important for us too, is to just get more comfortable with this process ourselves so that we can better assist the researchers here at UT Austin who are coming to us with questions of their own about how to manage things on GitHub. So our methodology also included further processing information in the bio statement associated with the GitHub accounts that we were finding. So not only did we want to know, is this particular account UT Austin affiliated, but also, what is the type of affiliation for this specific individual? So are they a faculty member? Are they a postdoc, student, alumni, boot camp student? And there are potentially other categories that we could think of as well that one might try to identify. And so, if we find somebody that's referencing UT Austin somewhere in their bio statement, they might say, I'm a professor in this department at UT Austin, or I'm currently an undergraduate studying biology at UT Austin, or I graduated from UT Austin in 2018. So these are all, very different, audiences that we could think of potentially engaging with. When we're doing an assessment of repositories, doing an assessment of what programming languages are in use, what licenses people are using, we might want to break down that information based on different categories of users, right? So alumni, they could be off doing all kinds of things that might not be quite as relevant for us to look at what programming languages they're using or licenses they're assigning to their projects. We might be more interested in looking specifically at what faculty are doing, students are doing. Is there a divergence between the licenses that faculty are selecting and what students are selecting, or differences in the programming languages that they're utilizing? That could all be potentially relevant for us. So really, we're thinking about how can we gather information that's going to allow us to make better decisions about outreach and engagement with our community. And we realize this is also not a perfect process. So our script right now is it's not using AI or anything like that to try and make this determination, although that could be a possibility down the road. We're using some fairly simple logic, like is the word professor or faculty or something else included in the bio statement that might indicate this particular account is associated with somebody that's in a faculty position. Do they mention a word like graduate student or MS student or something like that might indicate they're a graduate student at UT Austin? So using this methodology, we have, as of a couple of days ago, identified 1,667 GitHub accounts that are potentially UT Austin affiliated. You can see a screenshot here of the CSV that has been produced by this run of the script from a couple of days ago. And we can also track information about the number of public repositories that they have associated with their account, the number of followers, when their account was first created, the last time it was updated. So this is all information pulled directly from GitHub using the REST API. Then we see columns J and K here that are things that are not coming directly from the GitHub account, but these are based on our processing of information in the bio statement. So we're predicting what their affiliation is with the university. Are they most likely a faculty member, student, alumnus? And these are predictions, so there's a possibility that some of these values here might not necessarily be correct. Then we also tried to further predict if they mention they're a student, are they a doctoral student, undergraduate, master's student. Again, so that's just a prediction. We can't be 100% certain that those values are correct, but we based our preliminary overview of the data and review of it, that does look like it's a fairly reliable process we have there. And as you can see, that there are also quite a few accounts where we're not able to make a prediction that there's something in the bio statement that tells us this person might be UT Austin affiliated, but not enough information there to identify if they are a faculty member or a student. So you might notice that some of these columns are blank. So we don't have any information here under the name. So this would be like the personal name of the account holder, the company name, email, bio statement. So those are all things that we can retrieve with the script. And there's actually a parameter in the env file that can be adjusted in order to dictate whether you want that information to be filled in or not in the CSV. So for this presentation, knowing that it would be recorded, I elected to show the limited detail version that has removed this information. But if you were to run this code for your own institution, and it's pretty easy to set it up so that you can do that, you can set it to full detail mode and all of these things will be filled in. So we do want to be very conscious of user privacy on GitHub. Obviously, these things are all being publicly shared. This is public information that the users themselves have filled in on their own and elected to share publicly through their GitHub account. But in prior conversations with other folks affiliated with CURIOSS and with the CHAOSS group as well, we've talked a little bit about how we should be managing information that users, although they're sharing it publicly, might have concerns about it being included in a data set like this. So wanted to err on the side of caution here in sharing that today. But if you were to run this script for your own institution, you'd have the ability to fill in those fields as well. So that's definitely something the script can do. And I notice there's a lot of things going in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to actively monitor that because I'm trying to get through the slides, but definitely interested in responding to any questions that might be coming up now. All right. Oh, sorry. All right. I will also mention that our the script is able to identify over 34,000 GitHub repositories that are associated with the accounts that we think likely have some sort of UT Austin affiliation. So you can, again, see a screenshot of the repository CSV here. And this is pulling in all of the information that is available about these repositories using the GitHub API. There isn't any field where we're doing any sort of prediction or anything like that in this particular CSV like we are with the account CSV. There's a lot of useful information that you can see here. We can see how many people are watching these repositories or have starred them, how many forks have been created of the repositories, what is the primary language and use in the repository, what license has been assigned to the repository. So there's a lot of really good information here that we've really just started to dive into, and I'll share some of our preliminary results looking at analysis of the repository data set here in just a second. But this has been really valuable to us and not too difficult to acquire then once the accounts have been identified that we think have UT Austin affiliation. So to look at some of the preliminary results, these pie charts here have been generated with another script that is available through our institutional innovation graph or GitHub repository. So there's the script that runs to generate the CSV files, and there's a separate script that can be used to visualize the information gathered in those CSVs. So what we're looking at are visualizations of the data in the repository CSV file. And this was just run today on the data that was collected a couple of days ago. And you can see that, interestingly, if we do an assessment of the licenses, the software license that have been assigned to each of the GitHub repositories that we've identified with the scripted process, we can see that the vast majority do not have a license assigned to them. So for us, I think that represents that there is work that we can do in our training sessions and in our consultations that we offer to really stress the importance of selecting an open source license when somebody publishes code to GitHub. And we can see that for those repositories that have a license selected, the MIT license is by far the most common followed by Apache and the new version 3.0 license. And there are a variety of other licenses that are less commonly assigned to repositories, which we have lumped together here into an other category. And we've done that because otherwise we see some very, very small slices that really clutter the data visualization. So again, this is all shared through GitHub, so you can also make use of this data visualization functionality if you generate your own CSVs of you know, repositories and accounts that might be affiliated with your institution. We've also taken a look at the primary language utilized in these affiliated GitHub repositories so that we can see, again, what programming language are members of our community most likely to be familiar with and utilizing in their projects. This can be helpful for us when we're thinking about leading workshops. Maybe the focus is really just on open source software use of GitHub, and we're not trying to teach someone how to use a programming language, but what are our students, faculty, staff most likely to already be familiar with? We can look to this for some guidance there, and we can see that Python is the most prominently used language, followed by JavaScript, and we see not a lot that was really too surprising here in terms of which programming languages were most commonly utilized, but more interesting, I think, to see just the diversity of what members of our community are sharing on GitHub. So there certainly are some challenges that we have encountered trying to develop this process. We recognize that our approach is absolutely not perfect at identifying UT Austin affiliates. It's certainly missing folks that we know have UT Austin affiliation. And it might be, in some cases, identifying accounts that do not actually have UT Austin affiliation. So somebody might say they're a big fan of UT Austin football or something. It doesn't mean that they actually are affiliated with the institution, and we're misidentifying them when we look at the information in their bio statement on their GitHub profile. There are also quite a few users who do not have a bio statement filled in at all, and so we're not finding them currently. There are issues that we have encountered with GitHub API rate limits for the REST API. So you can see a screenshot of one of these messages from earlier today as I was making some adjustments to the code and trying to run it and getting a notification that it had encountered a secondary rate limit. So that's one of the things that we're trying to adjust the code to make that less likely to cause problems. We are focusing on really achieving our institution-specific goals, which might be different than the goals that you have with your institutional open source program office, while also trying to develop this code base in a way that will allow it to be generally useful for others. So we're trying to put ourselves in that mindset of, yes, this is something that we want to do, but if somebody might want to run this in a slightly different way, or also get at additional information that wouldn't be too hard to obtain if we make some adjustments to the code. Like let's make sure that we think about that and factor that into our process. We're also still thinking about how and to what extent the data that we are gathering should be shared out. So again, we've had some conversations with this group already and others on a one-on-one basis to think about some of the issues that might be associated with sharing this data, which again is all public, it's all openly shared on GitHub. But one of the things I hope we have a chance to talk about today, when we have an open discussion, is what are some of the things that you would consider as you think about costs and benefits here, and really wanting to make sure that we might be helping folks to promote their open source projects, which they are openly available on GitHub, and so presumably people would want to have additional attention brought to them. But what if a year or two from now they want to update information about their account or take down their account entirely? If we have created a data set today that includes their account information, that if that's been openly shared, that's something that they wouldn't have direct ability to edit or delete. So that's a question that we're thinking about. We also want to think about looking beyond GitHub. So GitHub is not the only place where people might be sharing open source software. And we also want to think about the research software that has been published so that it has received a DOI or other persistent identifier and might be more clearly affiliated with a specific research project or research publication. So one of the places we've started to look recently is Zenodo. A preliminary scan of Zenodo has revealed that there are 231 published software records with at least one UT Austin affiliated author. So we can see a screenshot of this CSV that's been produced with a separate scripted process. The script that was used to create this data set is not yet shared through our institutional innovation graph or GitHub. So that's one of the things that we hope to share soon, though, once it's a little bit more refined. And interestingly, one of the things that we've noticed here is looking at the repositories that have received a DOI when they've been published to Zenodo. Not all of the GitHub accounts listed here have been found in our GitHub account data set that we have created using the separate scripted process, which I've been describing here. So clearly there's a mismatch. Interestingly, when we look at some of these users that we're not finding that we know do actually have UT Austin affiliation and would ideally have been found with our scripted process, and at least quite a few cases, it's been because they don't have bioinformation filled in at all for their account. So that's one of the things that clearly is a significant obstacle for us right now. We're also running into situations here where our UT Austin researchers are not necessarily the lead author on a particular project, and so they might not have contributed too much to the coding necessarily, but are listed as a co-author for the overall project. So there might be situations where we're seeing researchers listed here from UT Austin that aren't necessarily very active in open source development themselves. There are plenty of next steps that we are thinking about, and room to continue to build this out. And since it has been released as an open source project, these are all things that you or potentially others might want to contribute to, and would be glad to talk with you about these things. We'd like to retrieve information about the repositories associated with UT Austin researchers and start to further process that information to assess what level of collaboration the accounts that we're identifying have with other UT Austin affiliated accounts. What is the level of collaboration with GitHub users who are external to UT Austin? We think that would be really interesting to see, internal versus external collaboration on open source projects, to do a network visualization, identifying how members of our internal network are connected via open source projects. Right now, we have a fairly well-established baseline. Again, we might want to refine our queries and other things a little bit further before we say that this is a good, current, and comprehensive overview of our GitHub community right now. But once we feel confident in that, we want to establish that as a baseline that we can use for assessment down the road for longitudinal analysis to see how is use of GitHub changing over time at UT Austin, both in terms of how many active users do we have, but what percentage of those users are specifying open source software licenses for their repositories. As an example of behavior that might also be changing over time based on services and resources that we provide to our community. We'd like to perhaps start to further categorize the users that we are identifying as active on GitHub. So thinking again back to our participation pathway, what percentage of the accounts that we are identifying are contributing to other open source projects versus only openly sharing their own code? As an example of two different types of use of GitHub that we might be identifying. We are interested in mapping connection to published articles and research data sets, so looking at open scholarship more broadly and the role that open source software plays in that. We want to look not just at the repositories owned by UT Austin researchers, but also those that they contribute to. So what are the characteristics of those projects that they might be contributing to? And we definitely want to explore potentially shifting from use of the GitHub REST API to the GraphQL API, which, as the GitHub documentation lays out itself, offers more precise and flexible queries. So that might be a benefit to us. And that's everything that I have to share for the presentation. If I exit out of this, I can quickly go to our GitHub repository itself to show you that. You can see that we have the GitHub activity metrics tool. So this is what's generating those CSV files for our accounts and repositories. We also have the data visualizer script, which is still quite early in its development. That was used to produce the pie charts that we saw earlier. We have an env file with quite a few parameters that can be customized by folks at other institutions to allow them to adapt scripted process for their own objectives and hopefully allow them to also gather information about GitHub activity for their own institution that they might find helpful. And with that, I think I can wrap up sharing here and would definitely be glad to answer any questions that might have come up.